So another thing that is a crucial part of a robust strategic plan and strategic planning process is the development of competitive advantage. Now, in this video, I'd like to briefly talk about what the competitive advantage is, and in the videos that will come, I'd like to briefly describe two specific kinds of competitive advantage. Now, first of all, let's look at the definition what the competitive advantage is, so that we can understand more about it. We can understand what we're talking about. Now, we say that a company has competitive advantage if in a given industry it consistently creates more profit, is more profitable than the competition. Again, so in an industry you have several companies competing. We say that the one that is consistently making more profit has competitive advantage. So we don't really mention nothing about product or better product or cheaper product. We just say make more money, then you have the competitive advantage. Now, after we establish that those companies that make more money, make more profit, have competitive advantage, we might want to look into where from comes this ability to generate more profit. What allows that, right? And that's the source of competitive advantage. All right, so if you think about it, there's only two ways that the companies can generate profit, right? The first way is to increase the price. Let's assume that the volume of the sold product will be the same, right? So given that the sales will be the same, there's two ways to increase the profit. Let me rephrase it this way. The first one is to increase the price. Okay, so I can sell a product. Like now let's look at this, right? Let's imagine I have this is an average price of a product, X, right? Now I can take my product and sell it for a higher price, X plus 30%, right? In this case, I am selling a product that is more expensive than the average, right? But I can achieve that consumers will like the product so much that they are willing to spend those 30% more and buy my product. Think of Bentley, think of Versace, think of Dolce & Gabbana, think of luxurious jewelry, right? Some sort of brand, from this industry. These brands are obviously more expensive than the average price of the average product in the industry. Bentley is more expensive than a car, like maybe not just by 30%, but by 200%, right? But still there are customers who are willing to pay that. We say that such a company has differentiated competitive advantage. Now, differentiated competitive advantage is when you're able to provide more value to the customers that they will pay for, right? So your cost might as well be higher than the average, let's say, competition. Let's say this is the cost Y, right? So maybe your cost would be here, higher than the average benchmark in the industry. So other car manufacturers might have lower cost, but you don't really care that much about your cost. You're obsessed with increasing the value, and together with that, increasing the price of your product. Your profit comes from here, the difference between the cost and the revenue, right? So like for any other company. Differentiated companies are those where the managers, if I just simplify, they wake up and they think from the morning till the evening about how they can improve their product so that the customers will in exchange give them more money, pay them more money for the product. How to increase the price of the product, what features to add, what specifications to add, what branding to add that might lead to customers willing to pay more for the product, right? So this is the differentiated advantage. Now, this is not to say that such companies like Bentley, for example, Versace, don't care about cost at all. That is not possible. Such company would not exist, right? But they would go bankrupt soon if they didn't care about cost at all. But their priority is not the cost, that's for sure. Now, this is the first so-called generic strategy, again by Michael Porter. The differentiated advantage is again, or differentiation as you call it, strategy, is one of those three generic strategies that we'll just now get into by Michael Porter. Right? The second strategy might be the cost leadership. So this is differentiation, and this is cost leadership. So a cost leader is like opposite to the differentiator, right? The cost leader is putting on the market an average product. It sells it for price X, which is an average price, right? But his absolute focus is put on saving costs. So his costs are much lower than the average competition. So maybe it's Y minus 20%, maybe. And again, the profit comes again from the difference in the sales and the costs, right? The revenue and the cost. You can name AirAsia as a low-cost carrier, right? You can name Walmart as a low-cost retailer in US, right? You can name Chery as a Chinese car manufacturer. These companies are striving to get acceptable products to the market, but their primary focus is on how to make these acceptable products as cheap as possible to produce. This is the cost leaders. Again, it's not to say that the cost leaders do not care at all about features, quality, these kind of typical symbols of differentiation, quality, branding, design. They care about it, but not at the expense of saving cost. In other words, they will not invest too much into quality, branding, advertising, customization, all kinds of that thing, if it should really harm their cost structure. The managers at the cost leaders companies, right, wake up in the morning and they are just all about how could we save a little bit today? Where's another penny of cost saving comes from? That's their philosophy, so to say. So that's a cost leadership. So cost leadership. Now, Porter strongly advises the third strategy, which is something we can call dual advantage, and that is when you're trying to have both advantages. So both the differentiation and both the cost leadership. So such company would generate, great amount of profit because it is selling a product that is more expensive than the competition, and the customers are still willing to buy that because it's differentiated. It has more features, better design, better quality, better service, whatever goes with the typical differentiation strategy. But at the same time, it is cheaper to make than the competition, so it has lower cost. Well, Michael Porter advises against that because he says once you try to achieve both, you are going to be stuck in the middle. You're going to have products that are not so great because you're still trying to save some money, but you're not going to save that much money because you're still trying to make nice products, right? So great products. That's not really clear strategy, right? So, but anyhow, there are companies that can pull this off. Apple became a tremendously successful company, mostly due to the success of their iPhones and the small gadgets, right? If you look at iPhones, at the time the company was making iPhones, right? You might argue that the company Apple had dual advantage, yeah, because if you look at the cost structure, dual advantage. If you look at the cost structure of Apple, you would find out of the products. You will find out it's actually quite cheap to make an Apple iPhone, because at that time, maybe we're talking about 2011, 2010. But let's go back in time because now it's not that clear that Apple is still pursuing the strategy. But at that time, it was extremely successful. Now with the departure of Steve Jobs, Apple is changing their strategy, and I'd say that there are many people that are kind of like cautious about where this will lead to. But let's go back to 2011. Apple has one iPhone, right? iPhone 4. Now, to make this iPhone is actually relatively cheaper than to make similar phones of HTC, Sony, and other leading brands at the time, which some of them already don't exist, like Alcatel. Right? So it was cheaper to make iPhone because why? Apple had a huge economy of scale. It has just one type of product, and it was purchasing in millions all the parts: displays, screens, processors. While the competition like Sony and Alcatel and HTC, they had many kinds of phones in 2011, like upper class, middle class, lower class phones. So they didn't have this economy of scale. They were buying different kind of different sizes of displays, different power of processors, and so on and so forth. And that didn't allow him to benefit from the economy of scale. So Apple's cost structure was quite low. Apple costs were quite low, while at the same time, the price was high, like it is now. The iPhone 4 was always more expensive than the competition. Well, so now you might realize why Apple sits on such a huge amount of cash, because it has dual advantages. It's producing quite cheaply, but still selling quite expensively. However, as Michael Porter said, and I already mentioned that, most companies should ignore this third strategy, this dual advantage, because it's very difficult to achieve, and should rather choose one of those generic, clear strategies where you're choosing your fight, you're choosing your battle. Are we going to be a special producer with a great added value and also high price, or are we going to be cost leader with a acceptable product, but we'll be focusing on price? Now, in next videos, we'll look in more detail into how to create a differentiated advantage and how to create a cost leader's advantage.